I am unashamed. What about you?
Larry's on, Dad.
You catch any ops yesterday?
No, I got to run my net today, but I was back on the jelly making.
I need to
Dan
get
and
some
I-
of that jelly.
Huh?
I need to get some.
I heard Dad's up to 70 pints.
Yeah, we got.
Well, Phil, you can't eat 70 pints of jelly.
Well, but some reason every time y'all go by there,
Somebody's eating 70 pints of jelly.
they cleaned it out last year. I'm like, I made about 40 last year. The times were hard, but this time I said,
Well, I kind of got excited. Although I don't eat jelly anymore because
it is the very best. I tried it on some bread. We had some fried shrimp. I just put it on some bread. But this particular batch that's some of the.
Well,
it is really, really
You know how
good.
many jars of jelly I got from you last year? 1. So it wasn't me. I got 1.
Yeah, Willie was there yesterday, and I had
Uh-oh.
about 4 that I hadn't put up yet. It was on top of the counter there in the country kitchen.
They were still warm, wasn't they?
Scarfed them up.
Yeah, he told me he was out here. I saw it. So yesterday it was weird because I saw, we all live here. Of course, I see y'all because we work together, but I mean, I don't ever see anybody. Everybody's going in so many directions. So I actually saw Willie first at a ball game. So his grandson and my granddaughter are playing on the same wee ball team. So they're 4 years old. So wee ball.
That just doesn't seem like a good idea to me.
No, but it's not bad because it introduces them to the game. I mean, they don't know what they're doing, but they're out there.
I think it's a social outing. Let's be
Oh, it
honest.
is. Because look, there's as many parents out there in the field trying to tell them what to do as there are kids. So they get out there. Of course, they all hit this is a tee, but they're 4 years old. So they can only hit the ball, most of them, 10 feet. They hit it, it goes right there. So all the players on the defense are all right there at the pitcher's mound. There's about 8 or 10 little kids. And so when the ball is hit, it's like the whole herd moves. And
How much screaming is going on?
A little bit of screaming.
Yeah.
Then there's crying because somebody will get hurt under the pile. Because then they all dog pile trying to pick the ball up. So the other little kids run to first, sometimes by way of the pitcher's mound. So they run down to first. They throw it. Somebody will finally get it and throw it over there. Of course, the first baseman standing looking around. And then it rolls all the way to the dugout. So it's just
Like a time?
Yeah, you only play for 45 minutes.
I mean, but how do you ever get somebody out?
You don't. Well, every once in a while they do. Shockingly, somebody will catch
How do they move on to the next inning?
I don't think there's any, you bat one time around and then the next one. So everybody gets a bat.
I'm a fairly patient man, but I've never tried that.
Well, it's hilarious
You're
to
a little
watch.
old for that, Phil.
Oh, I know it. Way too old.
But anyway, so John Reed is out there because his boy, which is Willie's grandson, so he's playing. And then, of course,
We did all that as children out in the yard.
yeah, y'all used to just
But
play.
no parents.
You weren't organized.
No parents got out there and said, y'all. But we started with a sock filled with other socks. And the only ball we had was
A ball of socks.
the ball of just rags
What did you? What
tied in a knot.
was your bat? A
It
2x4?
was the football, the baseball. It was
everything.
well, it's all it had.
It was the ball.
The ball. It was
I'd heard
round,
this story.
and you could bounce it off pretty good with a stick, just a club. We'd hit it, go to first base.
Did you just get a club out of the woods or something? I mean, because I didn't have a real bat
There
either.
were no bats.
Yeah.
Got your own bat.
Yeah, and the old coach up there got wind of it or something up there at the high school and drove up one day and he just threw a football out the window. We was all standing there, Si, he was naked. He never wore clothes till he was about six or seven. But we was all standing there and the coach drove up.
It's a frightening
and
thought.
he just threw the ball out the window. Didn't say hi, good to
And
see
then
you.
just drove off?
And just drove off. He had somebody else driving him, but he just pulled up there and they threw a ball out. We all stood there, we was watching him leave. Nobody moved, We just sitting there.
I thought it was a bomb.
Y'all should have put that in. Y'all should have put that in the movie.
Oh,
Because
man.
then you became an NFL caliber quarterback.
That's right.
Yeah.
Some guy just chunks a ball out. So you picked it up and probably put some zip on it.
It was just stunned silence at first, and as the dust settled, him going up the road, because we thinking something's up here, something.
Like there's a bomb in it.
Oh yeah, we I like who in the world, you know?
What just happened?
Oh yeah. So finally, somebody broke ranks and went out there and got it, and we all gathered around. It was a good night.
What is it?
You know, it's a leather football.
So you were aware of the game of
And
football.
I mean, people just scattered in every direction, and that's when I first had something, and everybody was throwing the ball. When I threw it, I mean, you know, had a little
zip
kick to it.
Yeah.
So after that, you know, did we ever wear that thing out?
Yeah.
We wore it down to just a pile.
Did he
of
wind up, was it that guy that was your coach when you finally got to high school? Was he
Robertson was his last name, but I don't know whether he was kin to us. Scotty Robertson. He coached in the.
Well, he had to be.
I know he coached in college, but I think he coached in the pros.
This is one of the more bizarre stories I've heard. So he doesn't say, "Hey, boys,"
Not a word.
he just throws a
Just
football.
threw it out the window. And it bounced about twice. And Si looked at me, and I looked at him, you know, and all my cousins and everybody.
So I was 6. So what? You were 8
About
or 9?
8 years old.
Yeah.
So, and y'all, all your older brothers, because they've told me, of course they're all gone now, but they all told me, you know, they all played football. Like Jimmy Frank played high school football.
Yep.
Harold, I don't know if he played or not, but Tommy was really good. Mm-hmm. And then you. And then Si talks about it. He said he was the baddest, 130 pounds, and Caddo
Side stories
Parish.
doesn't make much sense.
He was famous for just head on to a 235 pound
That's what he tells it.
Fullback. Si would just come in there just like and just head on and just get trampled. I mean, he just bounds off and just stomped on. He's grabbing, you know.
So I was listening to their podcast, which is
I've always said there was too many licks to the cranium.
Well, I think maybe that's we know what happened.
It did some damage.
I was listening to their podcast, the Duck Call Room, which is our sister or brother podcast, I guess. And so when they were doing their ads for Omega, because they do ads for Omega XL, Si's lead in to the Omega story about sore joints was him playing football in high school. He said, you know, boys, when I used to take on those 220-pound running backs, after a game of that, I needed something for my joints. If I'd only had Omega XL. I got so tickled because I thought, who goes back 60 years ago to your high school football?
Well, but I mean, you feel, you know, back then, whatever major injury happens, it does start to ache. I think when you cross the 50-year-old mark.
Well, I think that's why Dad was very wise and stopping at the college level, because when I look at his peers, including Bradshaw, and watch them trying to get out of a chair, it's like, whoa, the game was unkind.
They're going to break your bones.
Yeah. It just
They're going to break bones.
shoulders and knees and
Well, I told you I popped something in my shoulder in the last game I played, and I just kept running through the dugout into the parking lot, got in the vehicle, and that was because it just pow, like a 22 bullet went off. But you know, to this day, that thing just is sore from time to time.
oh yeah, you tore something in there.
Oh, I
you ripped something that won't come back.
Yeah.
So I saw Willie, which was unusual, at the game. So we talked the whole time and caught up, which was fun. And because the game is like, you know, it's
a social event.
well, right, and it's like
They're all screaming.
It's background noise while you're talking. So, and then I get home and Missy comes over, and because I ain't seen Missy in a while either. I've been supposed to call her back for a week. She said, well, I decided to just do a surprise attack out because I can't get you to call me back and say, I know I'm big timing you. But so she had the baby with her, and I confirmed your story. I told her you told the story about, you know.
Hey, don't be breaking the fifth wall. What is that? The
fourth wall.
The fifth wall.
So I said, well, Jase told us the story yesterday about him cleaning up. And she said, yeah, I know. I was like, what are you doing? Like,
She does that every time. It was not like the first time.
Then she said, I guess he must have been coming back there because he knew it was going to be a podcast story. And I said, well, it was a podcast story. But I told her why. I said he was reading in the Bible about manning up, and he didn't want to get the question from God, oh, man, where are you?
Yeah.
So I said he was convicted. And then we talked about, you know, puke for the next 5 minutes, you know, so.
It's a lot.
She said, well, it's not really puke because it's just straight back milk.
It is. I think it's a reflux issue.
Yeah, but he drank it at our house last night, no problem.
You never know, Al.
That's what
It's the Russian.
I know. Dad has cleaned up many a baby puke in his day.
It's like
Few rare moments. I was like alone with one of y'all, when it came diaper changing time. But I tried.
That's a bad feeling, isn't it?
Oh,
It's like the 6
Where are the-
bottles are like the bullets of the roulette.
yeah.
So he drinks one, you're like, oh, you turn the next one, like that third
But you know
one.
one of
It's just, it's the sound of it. I mean, you can hear it 40 feet away, just the sheer volume and force. It has a certain splatter sound to it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
about 3 splatters. It's like
Yeah.
whop, whop, whop. And you go in there, it just looks like some movie set and somebody created it so much. Like, how does one, well, then he's grinning.
Yeah, he feels better.
Yeah, it's like, well, I got that.
We were on vacation one time, and so I had Alex's 3, and they were all little. And so, 2 of them still in diapers. And it was me and Vinny and the kids. The women all left, went shopping or something. So he went upstairs to lay down with the boys, which was good. So, they all went to sleep. So I had Pearl, she's little. And, I mean, she just filled a diaper up. I could smell it, And then I started thinking, I wonder how long would it be? How wrong would it be for me to just wait this out till they got back? So I thought, no, that's no good because the little kid's got to be stuck in it, Yeah. And then I went up to see if I could, make some noise where Vinny'd get up because it's his child. No, sleeping like a rock, and I didn't want to wake the other kids up. So I thought, you know what? I'm like Jase. I got to man up. I got to go in. It'd been years since I'd done it, and it was unpleasant.
Here's the difference in me and you. When I go to the poop side of things, I hazmat up. I got masks, gloves.
I did have gloves on.
I go in there at some toxic waste dump, radioactive material, because I don't want to trigger the gag reflex on me.
Put a
Which
clothespin.
might trigger his gag reflex.
Then we got vomit on top of everything. Yeah,
It's But I tell you this morning, because we got the little monitor thing, and I heard him up there. Ooh, ooh, ooh. That's. But he doesn't wake up crying. Most kids.
He's a pretty happy baby.
Oh,
Yeah.
So I finally, Missy was making a bottle. I went up there. I was looking at him. He just like, ooh, smiling.
It's like a dove cooing in the
Way
morning.
better.
How old is this child now?
3 months.
3 months old.
Yeah.
3 months.
He's way better than my other kids were. So, that's nice. But because my kids, they just woke up screaming.
Yeah.
I mean, like, feed me or I'm gonna do this for hours.
Feed
Well,
me.
I guess Willie, Jase, and Jep have all chosen to adopt children.
Well, we haven't
Not
adopted this boy,
but yeah, they all have had
They're raising
either
him.
foster children
It's kind
or.
of semantics.
Yeah.
But actually, Jase had already done it with some big adult
Oh, yeah.
kids too. So yeah, it's a neat thing when the opportunity is there and people have had the
like what we were talking about in past podcasts. So
You ought to be-
you have a breakdown in the family. Other people have to come along. I think if you're going to be the body of Christ, you need there's a reason that James 2 that says true religion is taking care of
Widows and orphans.
I mean, there's a principle there that you need to take care of people who
They can't take care of
Yeah,
themselves.
who can't take care of themselves.
It's a sacrifice. It's a
But
sacrifice.
because today there's a lot going on in the news about Supreme Court. Somebody leaked, a potential ruling, and so it's creating a lot of controversy.
I was beginning to lose hope on whether they're ever going to stop killing children.
Well, so we're feeling better after all this happened. But I say Lisa and I speak a lot on behalf of pro-life movements and events. Let's take a break. We found out from our friends at Omega XL that the body has 360 joints in it, from your neck down the vertebrae, the back, the arms, all the way down to your feet. 360 joints.
Ooh.
A lot of joints. And the problem is, as you get older, your body quits producing SPMs, which keep your joints healthy and lubricated. So that's why you have aches and pains. I mean, it makes perfect sense once I kind of understood the science of it. Well, this product helps restore your SPMs. It rejuvenates your joints and muscles so that you really can move like you were when you were young. And so it's a unique supplement. It's great. It's the only thing Dad takes. I take it as well. We got Mom finally taking it, so hopefully we're going to help her with some aches and pains. Si loves it as well. So if you want to check these guys out, it really is a great product. It'll help you. You go to omegaxl.com/Phil. You're going to buy one bottle. You're going to get a second bottle for free. So it's going to give you a couple of months supply, which is what you need to build up to it, and you'll notice the difference. omegaxl.com/Phil. Or you can call them at 800-844-4888. That's 800-844-4888. Check them out. And one of the things I always talk about, the other half of the pro-life movement has to be fostering and adoption. Because if we start winning that cultural war and there's less abortions, that means there are going to be more children.
That's correct.
Because you're not going to stop ways that kids get here. So who's going to step into that?
But to choose to kill them from that because your fellow man didn't rise up and look after you, no matter what background you had and no parents, whatever.
Every child deserves to have a shot.
I say it's where let them live.
So what I'm saying is what Jason is doing right now, that's just as pro-life as convincing somebody not to have an abortion, because when someone makes that call and has a kid, who's going to step in? It's going to have to be people of faith. The governments can't do it.
That's right.
I mean, they can't even run their own situation. They ain't going to be able to take care of kids. That's why they've been just like, yeah, kill them. We don't care. So, I mean.
Well, it's like I keep saying, people get all worked up about politics and the government when, in actuality, even if they did sign everything you wanted to sign, it still takes people on an everyday basis.
Well, and the church still
making decisions.
The body of Christ,
it's got to come from homes.
And the body of Christ, Chase, has responsibility for our fellow man. I mean, that's us. We should be the compassionate ones. We should be the ones willing to put ourselves out there. I mean, that's us. That's what we should be doing.
I'm saying the house is where all the time is spent. So if that breaks down, you're just not going to fix it with the system.
Some guy said one time, I think he was a politician, but I never forgot it. He said, everybody keeps worrying about who's going to get in the White House. You need to worry about the man in your house.
I agree with that 100%.
That's a pretty good line.
That's what my thought is. I mean, look, I'm all for, I'm going to vote for the most godly, principled person, but it starts in the house.
And by the way, even if this case flips, which is possible now, it's looking like it may happen, which is a great thing for America. I think it lifts a curse that's been on us for 50 years.
No doubt about it.
But it's just going to move the battle lines to the states. So, then it's what state you're in. So you're not going to not deal with this. But if it happens, I feel like it'll take a scourge off of us as a people.
Oh, no
we've
doubt
been under
about it.
that, because what a decision that was, which was
the
terrible.
Almighty is not going to bless nations who slaughter their children.
No. And look,
they were throwing them down the cliffs and in the flames, and
even in the Bible, there's numerous accounts where
children were sacrificed supposedly for the good of the people.
I mean, they hear about this prophecy about Jesus, and they're like, I start killing all the kids around.
Well, it was interesting. I was listening last night, of course, all the response to this Supreme Court thing. And one woman, it was so right out of the Old Testament, because her whole argument was what this is going to do to the economics of our country when women are forced to have children and not be able to abort. And I just thought, you're like Molech and the people in the Bible, like you're willing to sacrifice children for the economy. That's what they were doing when they would slaughter them so they could get rain or crops or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, you're just you're a scourge right out of the Old Testament.
Think about it, Al. If you view yourself and your father is salt water, your father.
Yep.
The one that's the one that brought you here.
Your patronage.
There's nothing you won't do.
Well, that's true.
I mean, there's just absolutely nothing when it comes to.
That's a good point. Why would you be moral, right? Yeah. Why would it matter?
They just look at it. Salt water is their father.
Yeah.
That's where they came from.
Right.
They're doing here. And there's three things in that Romans 1. Men suppress the truth by their wickedness. Down in verse 23, they exchange the glory of the immortal God For images made to look like mortal man, birds, animals, and reptiles of every description. They'll put up these gigantic statues with lion heads and all this stuff. Then at the bottom, they exchange the truth of God for a lie. They worship and serve created things rather than the Creator. That's them. That's the ones at Rome. That's the ones in America. And then even their women exchange natural relations for unnatural one. There's 3 times exchange is used in that text. They just put something aside and put their belief system in there, which is a weak one at best.
Yep.
It makes living on planet Earth a tough.
It's tough.
ride.
There's no doubt about it. But anyway, so Jase, to wrap that up, I mean, I am grateful that you and Missy are doing what you're doing, and I know it's because of taking care of a child, but wherever that leads,
They are full of murder. Full of it.
yeah. Oh, it's everywhere.
Oh.
Look at the crime rates, right? So we're shifting into a new study, which is exciting. I always love new studies. We wrapped up Corinthians, which looking back, what was the best thing about our Corinthian study?
The last few chapters, I had never studied 2 Corinthians in detail,
Right.
and I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I agree with you. The close of all that, which was kind of more powerful this time through, which, by the way,
underrated.
That's why you have to keep studying the Bible, because all of us have studied, either taught classes or listened to other people teach and listen to sermons. But every time you go through it, there's something unique and new that hits you that maybe hadn't before. So, when you read that verse in Hebrews, it says it's living and active and sharp and cuts and divides.
It's food.
Yeah. And
a lot of the big excuses for not coming to Christ are because bad things happen, or not believing in God. Bad things happen. He addresses 4 or 5 chapters there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, there's going to be some bad things that happen, and God's got that covered.
Yeah.
Here's how you should respond to it. I really thought it was encouraging.
Yeah, and it actually showed you out of that last thing that Paul makes the point that all the things he went through are what made him better in understanding how great Jesus was. The end of the day, that's what he said.
Physically, he was just being annihilated. You just think of what he looked like.
Yeah.
Talking about the scars.
The scars.
He was hand chosen to write most of the New Testament, and when he gave his little lifestyle, and people said, well, bad things happen to good people. There can't be a God then. Well, he flipped that on his head, said, oh, there's a God.
Well, they were saying it about him.
Yeah.
Right. Well, because you think about all cultures and religions and the gods and just through time, everything is connected to what is currently happening to you.
Yep.
So it's like, if you lose your job, it's like, well, God doesn't, he's not for me anymore.
Yep.
There's never a thought to where maybe that's the greatest thing that ever happened.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's just like,
if you worship this God, there will never, ever be any more pain. That they say, because if pain comes, well, you blew it somewhere.
Yeah.
But the Apostle Paul was saying, I didn't blow it. I'm just taking it all on the chin.
Yeah.
I've been beaten, stomped, chewed, railed, shipwrecked, whippings.
Yeah, that was quite a paragraph.
Well, I met a guy when I was out in California last week, and he's a doctor, a pediatric doctor, works in NICU. He was born with cerebral palsy. His mom was encouraged to abort him, and this guy, he's a believer, but he spent his whole life now helping children because he survived all that. But he spent a hard life. He still can't walk. He's without assistance, and it's like I thought, man, this guy's like Paul. He's like he understands.
The one time he brought up, look, I got this. It's like a thorn in my flesh here. Why don't you take care of that? Nah, my grace is sufficient for you. Suck it up, and just went right on.
Yeah,
he said, nah.
Okay.
He chose not to.
Therefore, I boast about my weaknesses, which is pretty powerful.
You think about it, it's a good way to roll.
Yeah.
If nothing deters you.
So Colossians, most scholars think it was part of they call them the prison epistles, Philippians, Colossians, Ephesians were all written while he was confined in Rome. So most of them have these books right around the first 4 or 5 years of 60, because Paul supposedly died around 65 or 66. So this would have been somewhere in that range. And he was in Rome when he wrote it. And then I just had a few little facts about the city I thought were interesting that I thought I'd bounce off of y'all. The city of Colossae, by the way, it's modern Turkey is where it would be now. It's located, but it's like underground. It's not they don't have ruins that you can see.
Yeah, but I read they're a group from Australia are going there to
excavate. Oh, really?
So,
well, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, like recently.
Well, they'll every time they do that, they find corroboration to what here.
That's correct.
Every time that's happened, it's
Isn't
like
that some. I guess it's just lucky.
Yeah, just so happens that they never find anything that contradicts. By the way,
no,
hasn't been found yet.
They may find some kind of scrolls or.
Although there was two earthquakes there.
There've been several, but there were two massive ones that leveled Colossae, along with Laodicea and Hierapolis, which Paul mentions a few times in Colossians. There's 3 cities within about 15 miles of each other. And it was kind of interesting because you'd think since Colossians is in the Bible, we don't have a letter to Laodicea, but he just said, read this letter to you.
And nothing bad would ever happen to him.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
Right. But Laodicea wound up being about 100 BC. They wound up being like the lead cultural and economic center. So Colossae was just kind of like, I was trying to compare it to like us. It'd be like, they were kind of the Balkanville of the triumvirate here, where we live. So they didn't have a lot going on. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
I think they were famous for making some kind of red wool.
Yeah, red wool. That was their big thing to market. So, and it's called Colossinum. It was the name of that. So that's where they got their name.
If you had wool in any form, though, that would be pretty good. If you could find it. I guess they made it from sheep.
Why red, though?
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't want somebody to spot me if I was trying to hide.
Yeah.
Have a camouflage version of it.
Look at what they're making now, Jase. They got clothing now that look like they're fixing to explode.
They were wool makers.
Willie got into that. He come out there with a duck head. He was walking around out there, people looking at him. I mean, that's pretty wild.
With a what?
With a duck
he was talking about when he was on the
wood
Masked
duck.
Singer.
They were calling him. They were calling him a mallard. They got that wrong. He dressed up like a wood duck, but it was quite the costume. Willie said he was just barely could breathe. He couldn't see out the thing, and he was walking around out there on the stage.
Did we take a break earlier? Did I miss a break? Yep. Yeah. Okay. Let's take a break. What I asked him, because I was like, since you can't see him, I was like, so did you really sing? You can tell me. I won't tell anybody. And because I thought maybe they were just playing it, Milli Vanilli style. But he was like, no, we performed every song in those costumes. And he said, if you notice, I had the mic way down low because my head was underneath that thing was 5 feet tall.
Oh, it was taller than that.
Yeah. And he said, my head was underneath it. He said, but I was sweating so bad because, Willie's a sweater. We know that from the show. And he said,
that would be a hot suit.
Oh, and he says, sweat's just pouring in my face. I'm trying to sing a song and, whatever version of dancing he was doing. I said, Willie, that sounded miserable. He said, oh, it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
But why do it? I'm like, what's this got to do with red wool?
Well, I'm just saying, red wool back then, and you were kind of dialed up for whatever the current situation was.
That's called the Unashamed podcast. We don't know, half the stuff comes up.
I said they made red wool, and Phil started talking about a costume, Willie.
He was talking about the flamboyance. I made the connection.
And you said something about hiding. I mean, if you look out there.
You're wearing camouflage.
Well, and if red wool was the way to go, if you looked out there, and about, a fourth of them are all walking around in red wool, you're like, what's this all about?
Well, they were known.
It'd be a funny thing to look at.
They were known as
bright red wool.
Well, they'd think it was weird. They were known for making.
There was probably
wool.
some other city that made green wool. So everybody had to.
Why red? I mean, look, have you ever taught Colossians though?
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah,
I was surprised when I was reading some of the history and theologians that some people don't believe Paul wrote this.
Oh yeah, they'll say that almost about every book. Somebody.
When he gets to the end, the last verse is, "I, Paul, write this greeting in my own hand." I thought, well, if you don't believe that,
I can understand debating Hebrews, but when the guy says, "I wrote it by my own
Jace,
hand,"
you've just explained why you're not a theologian. If you were a theologian, you'd say, "I don't think Paul wrote this." Somebody said, "Really?"
let me write a research paper on
Well, he said he did.
well,
He was lying.
He has a curious intro there where he says he puts Timothy. He says and Timothy. So I thought, well, I mean, because it does seem a little different in places on how he wrote some of the other letters, but it's a different letter. It's a different group of people. It's you kind of they also say their biggest religions here was that Gnosticism and this. Of course, he says something about the worship of angels somewhere in here.
Yeah. I think that's
Chapter
in
2, in verse 18. Do not let anyone who delights in false humility and the worship of angels disqualify you for the prize.
A lot of that goes on today.
Well, I thought about that. The only thing, when you think about just false teachers or people trying to mislead you, I mean, what a terrible thing is to act like you're humble and be false about it.
Yeah.
Now, that's about as low as you can go.
Oh.
You're acting like, because you think of humble, soft-spoken.
Jace, that covers in our current society a mighty throne.
It's a lot of them.
It's a mighty throne.
I dated a girl.
You saw them come in tall, gigantic hats and stuff, and robes, and the mannerisms, and it's just one thing after another.
It's quite the look when you say. I saw a lot when I was at the march because there was a lot of different groups there. But I wanted to mention, Jay, so the church in Laodicea is interesting to me because that's a sister city. It's kind of a bigger city. He mentions Laodicea 4 different times in Colossians, or the church there. But what was the most interesting to me, because Jason, I know you like Revelation, is that Laodicea is one of the 7 churches.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
I made the connection. Where are you
the book
seeing the
of Revelation.
Laodicea?
it's in 2. It's in 2:1. He mentions it.
One?
He says, "I want you."
Oh, I see. So
want you
how
to know-
far is that? How far was that?
That's
from
about.
Colossae?
It was 15 miles, 12 miles, 12 miles.
It was almost.
And so it was, but he mentions it again at the end, and he tells them to read this. But look over at Revelation, because in Revelation 2,
People forget Revelation is actually 7 letters to 7 churches.
correct.
Correct.
But I mean, people there when you say Revelation, what's the first thing people?
Oh man, then we go into the.
Well, most people, I heard it this past Sunday. Guy said, in Revelations. Missy said, "Don't say a word."
Yeah, because it was only one
That's
Revelation.
when I want to say, well,
Well,
let's talk after.
so so there's 7 churches that start in the book, and so the Revelation from John is for Jesus to these churches.
I feel like this is a clue. I can't remember which one.
So look at chapter 3, verse 14.
It's
and there
the
it
last,
is.
The last one.
Last one.
To the angel of the church in Laodicea, write these. Oh, this is going to be the lukewarm thing.
Exactly.
These are the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the ruler of God's creation. I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were either one or the other. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I am about to spit you out of my mouth.
And that's scary.
Now, I will stop right here, Al, and say that I've had an epiphany right here, in a live epiphany. Because this place was famous for these springs, and there was waterfalls, and there was 2 rivers. I was reading all about that at Colossae /
You mean a beautiful
Laodicea.
place?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Most real beautiful places it's fixed to have an earthquake.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's mountainous, and so, it's like California.
But, because they were talking about springs and different things. But I think, because you think, well, how come he would be saying, I wish you were
one or the other.
One or the other, because if you had cold water from a spring okay, you can drink it. If you have hot water from a spring,
You can soak in it, or
You could soak in it, but that way, because you think, well, why would he want them to be cold? Well, if it was
could still
in that
provide
region,
refreshing.
yeah, if it was in that
It's a
region,
good
I
thought.
think
I hadn't thought about that.
I don't think he was saying
I'd rather
be
you
really
cold.
good or really bad. He was saying cold's good,
productive.
yeah, hot's good. Lukewarm, what are we gonna do in that?
Can't drink it, and we can't sit in it. It's a good thought. I hadn't thought about that. Good epiphany.
Well, but I put it together because of all the springs I was reading about. Because I'm interested in, like, what could we catch some fish here? Could we hunt when I'm looking up these cities?
So this next section, by
I'm
the way,
not going to Turkey.
right?
But I would, because I thought I'm gonna see where this is at. I may go over there and metal detect or something. They said Turkey. I was like, I've heard a lot about Turkish prisons, and I don't know the stance on metal detector.
And Turkish bass. Let's take another break.
I mean, they may welcome me. I do like Turkish coffee.
So this next section, Jay, 17-18, goes in with what we know about the area that they were the most economically set. So so read that next.
So now I know why, when I was reading some of this stuff, why they kept bringing up the money, and
Right.
because they're getting that from here. You say, I am rich, I have acquired wealth, and do not need a thing. But you do not realize that you're wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. Well, he was just throwing haymakers.
Pretty hard.
I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, which goes back to those struggles and trials.
Yep.
So you can become rich, and white clothes to wear so you can cover your shameful nakedness, and salve to put on your eyes so you can see. Those whom I love, I rebuke and discipline, so be earnest and repent. There's our metanoia.
Yep.
Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him, and he with me. I love that verse.
Yeah.
To him who overcomes, I will give the right to sit with me on my throne, just as I overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. He who has ears, let him hear. All humans who can hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Oh, that's good. That's rich.
Which is rich. And it really, so understanding, I didn't really put it together too much till we were, prepping for this, that it was right there in this region, which is why he mentions 3 or 4 times, look, you need to get this letter. They need to read this. Well, now I know why.
They were known for their riches.
They were wealthy.
This was
They were known for that.
Right.
This is the third heart in the parable of the sower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember when he said,
Yep.
the first seed fell along the path, bump, devil came for it even.
Never got started.
Then the next one, in the rocks, no root, sun scorched it. It said, but the third one, what's the third one?
Came up in the weeds.
Yeah. Cares
The
of the world.
weeds. The
Cares
thistles.
of the world, worries of this life.
Yeah.
It just made it unfruitful.
Right.
Then the fourth heart, they grew, produced a crop.
Right.
So deceitfulness of wealth.
Yeah. That was in there.
Matthew 13.
Things that would choke out. So I thought that was interesting because that was from that region. So it sort of applies to what we're talking about.
Is America maybe guilty at some time or another of the pursuit of wealth?
Yeah. I would say we fit into a lot of those Laodicea.
Well, not the pursuit, the deceitfulness of wealth. Yeah, Matthew 13:22. The one who received the seed that fell among the thorns is the man who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it, making it unfruitful.
Right.
Which causes a gag reflex from the Lord, which is something you would never.
You don't want that.
No.
So I think.
Well, it's not rocket science. When you run up on individuals, you say, what are they known for? It will be the knowledge of God or not.
Yeah. So I found it interesting that in the city of Colossae, the Colossian church seemed to have things a little bit more on target than Laodicea, which would have been the more well-known place with the money and all that. And you just kind of put those two thoughts together. So one more little interesting thing, Dave, that I thought, and I don't know if you put this together or not. So Colossae was about 120 miles from Ephesus. So that's kind of the region. So it was further away, but Ephesus was close. And so whenever Paul was doing this missionary journey, the planting the church in Colossae was part of being in Ephesus because he was there for a pretty good while. So he was sending these guys out to plant these churches. So if in Acts 19:10, which is part of this, when he's dealing with everything in Ephesus, he said this went on for 2 years. So he was there a long time. He spent a lot of time in Corinth, but also in Ephesus, so that all the Jews and Greeks who lived in the province of Asia heard the word of the Lord. So, Dad, that was what you were talking about a minute ago about the message going out, which he's going to mention in Colossians. But so that's what he's talking about. That's when the church at Colossae was planted. So here's something interesting. Epaphras, who's mentioned in Colossians 1 and verse 7, and he's probably the guy that was the main guy there, because we read about him in Colossians. And then also,
he's the one who actually preached the gospel to him.
Correct. And so he was his guy. But then here's another name, Jase, because a few weeks ago you read from Philemon. So Philemon was also from Colossae. And the book of Philemon, which is about a runaway slave, and I put that in quotations because it's not, we've talked about on the podcast before, it's different as we think of modern slavery, what that meant. There was indentured servitude, but this guy ran out.
It's kind of like, we need a better way to describe it.
Yeah, but I mean, 'cause the problem is the word that's the word that's used in the translation, but it's not the same. It's something different. But anyway, because when you say that word, everybody has these responses.
I mean, it's kind of like classes of people.
Right.
Like they say
In an era,
middle class or
Because they talked about
working class.
Right.
in an era where there was no mechanization, there were no vehicles. There was human beings and animals. Well, you say if you're going to plow a piece of ground, the only labor force you have available is fellow humans.
Right.
That's the only way you're going to get this field planted because there was nothing mechanized. There were no tractors, there were no discs, there were no plow.
So you would make a deal.
There were no mules.
You would give your service to a person for 7 years or whatever the contract would run.
You hired him.
But it was different than what we think of hiring somebody because it was literally they were your servant to do whatever you had them to do. So let's take our last break.
Which wouldn't be a problem as long as you weren't mistreating them.
Right.
That's right.
And it wasn't based
You had an obligation not to mistreat the labor force.
Was it based on where they were from or what they looked like?
So a couple of verses I'll read in Colossians, and then I want you to take it from there on Philemon, because Onesimus is the guy that ran away. Well, he winds up in Rome with Paul, and he says, I'm sending him back to you, but he's a brother now. He was converted. He ran out on his responsibility. So he said, I'm going to send him back to you, Philemon, but just remember he's a brother now because he got converted.
We run up on that all the time.
All the time. So 2 verses that I think highlights that, and then you can take it on the Philemon side. In chapter 4, verse 1, Masters, provide your slaves with what is right and fair because you know that you also have a master in heaven. So what he's talking about there is for these people that have these indentured servants, he's like, you treat them fairly.
Can't mistreat them.
Because God treats you. And then he says in verse 9, he is coming with Onesimus, our faithful and dear brother, who is one of you. They will tell you everything that's happening here. And then of course, Philemon, when Paul wrote Philemon, which, by the way, was written, that was the other prison letter, was the same time. He wrote him a separate note. And
which is interesting. I always remember that verse 6 because I brought that up before.
Right.
But in light of, when you think about Colossians, and we just learned from Revelation kind of the backdrop of what was going on there, he didn't talk about money in Colossians.
That's right.
He talked about Jesus.
Yep.
Which is, to the point Phil makes a lot, when you drift away from that being your focus, bad things start happening.
Correct.
The deceitfulness of wealth flourishes, but it may be just rank immorality may flourish. Or, when you get your focus off Jesus, but in that,
but what's interesting is Jesus did talk about wealth to Laodicea because they had a problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I pray that you may be active in sharing your faith, Philemon 6, so that you will have a full understanding of every good thing we have in Christ. Which, it's one of the few backwards verses that make sense.
Yep.
Most people say, I don't know the verses. I don't know. I'm not smart enough. good enough or been in this long enough to share my faith. But if you know Jesus and you realize he knows you, if you have the capacity to understand that you're saved, you would also have the capacity to reveal that.
You need to be
how
able.
that
You need to be
process-
able to explain to someone who has given you life and immortality.
Well, you just think about it, Phil. You stand before God at the end, and what if he said, why should I let you in? Whatever you would say, which I would say would be a pretty good gospel presentation
Yep.
back to him.
Yep.
That's your presentation.
That's it.
If he says, why should you be in? You're
That-
like,
that
I don't
fulfills-
even know how I got here.
That fulfills your messenger, or as when we read in the Corinthian letter, the messenger is your ambassador. You say, I was your ambassador. I knew I was, and I told people about you, and I went around telling them how to be ambassadors.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was going to read this other verse in 14 where he says, I didn't want to do anything without your consent, so that any favor you do will be spontaneous and not forced. Then he says, perhaps the reason he was separated from you for a little while was that you might have been back for good, no longer as a slave, but better than a slave, as a dear brother. He is very dear to me, but even dearer to you, both as a man and as a brother in the Lord. That always stood out to me, that we talk about different classes or different jobs and different collars, or however you want to view the workforce. But in Jesus, we're brothers and sisters, and he uses that in Colossians a lot. The term brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
We'll get to them, but he focused on Jesus. He used brothers and sisters, and I just thought we could do. When you think of Colossians, what are the first verses that pops in your head? If you were going to say, is there a theme?
Well, I mean, I always think of the image of the
Colossians 1.
yeah, Colossians
15.
1.
That I think that's the first one.
Yeah.
He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. So talking about Jesus.
Right.
Because you think about it, going back to our point about standing before God and being able to relay why you got there, which is all about him and not you, and what Jesus did. You can't see God. Where's the verse in Exodus where it said, he said, you can't look on me and live.
Right.
It's like getting in between two wires times a million.
Right.
I mean, something that has this much force. I mean,
Well, you
that's
remember
the
even
way I understand
when
it.
the Ten Commandments came down, you remember it said he told Moses to get in the cleft of the rock and turn his back outward. In other words, he had to get into a
Well, even remember he got
and he
sunburned.
was like, I'm going to just pass by. And you
Well,
you don't want to be looking.
People are getting sunburned, radiating,
Yeah.
just from being in close proximity. So,
Probably had something to do with radiation, I would guess. I don't know. Who knows?
well, yeah, I don't know. We don't have the words here.
Exactly.
But so then when you think,
When you're glowing from being around somebody, that's quite the powerful
Some
thing.
atheists, I saw Dan showed it to me, and he's a renowned atheist. I don't know what his name was. He doesn't believe in God, but somebody asked him what would happen if the Earth's magnetic field and the speed at which we're traveling, what would happen for a second, 1001? What would happen if
We lost our magnetic field.
we lost that? And the atheist said, you would be blown into oblivion within
would fly apart.
within a second.
Yeah.
He said, if this thing hiccups, he said, at all.
Yeah.
1 second, a stutter Dan gave me the little magnetic field thing. I said, it's just sitting there turning.
You show me that.
Dan said, always remember, Phil, if that stops, we're dead. For a second.
Well, you
That
wouldn't even had a
atheist was
chance to
saying
look
this
at it.
thing is so finely tuned, 1 second out of whack, and we are dead, instantaneous. Just a wall of just eating up every fragment there is.
We talked about earthquakes. I mean, let's face it.
You look up and you see
just-
these stars, and they're disappearing.
Yeah.
Little trailer behind them.
By the way, that happened a long time ago, but we're seeing it way after it happened.
That's what is kind of planned for planet Earth.
Yeah.
No hiccups or you are done.
Well, I think another verse that goes with that
It's
is
fragile. It's just real fragile.
is Colossians 2:9. For in Christ all the fullness of the deity, which deity means God, Father, Holy Spirit, supernatural, however you want to characterize that,
That's a mouthful, that verse.
of the deity lives in bodily form, because their religion of the day
Yeah, well, he
that
wasn't really
this
a
body is corrupt, so Jesus can't be in a body because the body's bad. And they were worshiping angels. Just think about this powerful God, and they're like, so let me get this right. Unknown.
Yeah.
Maybe it's God.
It may be Donald
maybe
Trump.
God calling me. Unknown. It says unknown. I don't think I've ever seen that.
The last time I saw that was when the White House called Dad. So
Yeah. So my point was that people have to wrap their head around that this awesome God, who you can't even look on without being evaporated, who could stop the planet in a second, evaporation, crawled up in, not crawled, but
became.
just go with me,
Yeah.
in a woman's womb.
Yeah. Without
Right, without any
Sexual
human
contact.
and said, "Okay, I'm coming out of here, and I'm gonna give you an image."
I mean, I'm looking at a little sperm and one little egg.
Yeah, I've heard your take on
Yeah,
this.
and your mother.
We got to relive it,
And just to get you here that way is
it's pretty incredible.
real
But without
incredible.
it, it's impossible.
Oh, that's right.
And then here comes the image of the invisible God.
Yeah, because you finally get to see him.
I mean, just think about that.
It's
It's
incredible.
top 10 verses in the whole Bible is why we're here.
Could not agree
That's why
more.
when you say, well, why are you focused on Jesus? Why do you keep talking about Jesus? He's the image of the invisible God. This God that you can't even pass by him without just,
And the most
A
impressive.
mistake-free person, a mistake-free human, but who is God in a human body.
yeah.
I mean, you'd have had to sit under a tree and really think this out to get that much information.
So we're out of time, but we're going to continue this discussion in our intro in the overtime as we get into the study of Colossians. So check it out.
Well, that went quickly.
That was good.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.